welcome to the deep dive. Today we're opening up a really fascinating source stack. It's about one of the most talked about kind of dramatic mass UFO sightings ever. The 1994 Ariel school incident in Ruwa, Zimbabwe.
Oh yeah, this one's huge. It's a story that really, sits right at the intersection of skepticism and belief. You've got over 60 school children, we're talking ages 6 to 12.
60 kids.
Yeah, reporting they saw this silent, silvery craft. It apparently landed just outside their schoolyard during their morning break.
And the bit that really grabbed headlines, the thing everyone remembers, is they claimed these figures got out. Some kids said they wore black suits, and these figures supposedly communicated, like telepathically, a really heavy environmental warning, about pollution, technology, the planet basically being doomed.
And all of this apparently in about 15 minutes while every single teacher was conveniently inside for a staff meeting.
Right. So our mission today, this deep dive, is really to unpack that whole narrative. We want to get past the flashy headlines and ask some key questions.
Exactly. Like, first off, what specifically made this particular event seem so believable to so many people?
Yeah, and then what's the strongest skeptical take? We've actually got an overlooked, kind of mundane explanation we want to explore, too.
And third, maybe most importantly, because this entire thing hinges on these kids.
Yeah.
What does the latest science actually tell us about child witness testimony? How reliable is it?
Okay, so let's set the scene first. This didn't happen in a vacuum, right?
Not at all. Just days before this sighting at the school, the whole region was buzzing. There was tons of media coverage about this huge, fiery thing in the sky.
Which turned out to be
a Russian rocket booster, Cosmos 2290, burning up on re-entry. But lots of people locally didn't know that. They thought it was maybe a meteor shower or something else arriving. The atmosphere was already pretty charged.
Okay, so that's context piece number one, pre-existing hype.
Right. And the second key piece is how the information, the testimony, was gathered afterwards. The main investigators were Cynthia Hind, a UFO researcher, and later the big name, Dr. John Mack from Harvard.
A psychiatrist, yeah.
And the way those interviews were done, looking back now, it's seen as almost a textbook case of, contaminating the evidence. Lots of leading questions, the kind that can really shape or even implant memories, especially in young kids.
So if the evidence collection was potentially flawed from the start, how did this story get so big, so credible in many circles? Let's dig into that first clash, the pro-UFO side versus the skeptics.
Well, for the believers, the core strength is just the sheer number of witnesses. 62 kids.
It's a lot.
It is. And many of them, decades later, still stand by their stories. They say it happened just like they remembered.
And then you add Dr. John Mack into the mix?
Exactly. A Pulitzer Prize-winning Harvard professor of psychiatry. When he came out and basically validated the kids' accounts, said their experiences seemed genuine, that gave it enormous global credibility. He made it, quote, impossible to ignore.
But the skeptics pushed back hard, especially on this idea that the kids were somehow culturally pure or isolated, right? This idea that they couldn't have possibly known about aliens from TV or movies.
Yeah, that argument just doesn't hold water. Ariel was an expensive private school on the edge of Harare, not some remote village.
So they had access to
pretty much everything. Lessons were in English. They likely had exposure to Western media, movies, pop culture. The idea they were totally unfamiliar with UFO troops is, frankly, laughable.
And doesn't the variation in what the kids said they saw also point to cultural influence?
Absolutely. That's a crucial point. They didn't all see the same thing, despite what you sometimes hear. Some of the black students, for example, interpreted what they saw through their own cultural lens.
How so?
They thought the figures might be Takalashes. These are like goblins or mischievous spirits from local Shona and Indabel folklore.
Ah, okay. So not aliens, but something else supernatural from their own background.
Right. It suggests they saw something strange, something ambiguous, and their brains tried to make sense of it using the frameworks they already had, whether that was Western sci-fi or local folklore.
So the narrative of 60 kids saw the exact same alien starts to break down.
It really does. When you actually look at the specific descriptions recorded early on, they're all over the place.
Like what?
Well, you get one kid talking about a figure with a long, scrawny neck and huge eyes like rugby balls.
Oh.
Okay, kind of classic gray alien, maybe. But another kid saw multiple figures. A white one, a red one, and a black one.
Huh. Different colors.
Yeah. And someone else mentioned hair. Described a figure with long black hair, specifically saying it was like Michael Jackson's.
Okay, that's definitely not the standard alien image.
Not at all.
Right.
And that core element, the telepathic environmental message, that really only solidified later in the interviews, heavily shaped by Dr. Mack's framing. It wasn't something everyone reported initially. It was inferred from maybe 3 kids. The consensus story was kind of built afterwards.
Oh, okay, so we've got potential media influence, definitely flawed interview techniques, and wildly inconsistent descriptions. But let's talk about this prosaic explanation you mentioned, the puppet hypothesis. Where does that come from?
This comes from focusing on something really specific the kids described, how the figures moved.
Right, you mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, because the descriptions of movement are weird. They don't really fit standard alien lore from movies or books. Kids said the figures ran in slow motion or moved bouncy as if a human would run on the moon.
Bouncy.
Bouncy. And having stiff necks, staring straight ahead with no facial expression.
Yeah.
Just this awkward fixed gaze.
Okay, that does sound odd. Not like a sleek sci-fi alien.
Exactly. And those specific kind of awkward descriptions line up surprisingly well with something that was actually very common in Zimbabwe around that time.
Which brings us to the puppets.
Precisely. In the 90s, Zimbabwe had a really active theater for development scene. These were groups using performance, often including large puppets, for non-formal education. Think public health campaigns, community messaging.
Like anti-AIDS campaigns, maybe?
That was a huge one, yes. And one prominent group doing this was called AREPP, the African Research and Educational Puppetry Program.
And they used big puppets.
Oh, yeah. Not little hand puppets. We're talking 2-meter-tall mobilization puppets. Giant things designed to be seen by crowds. They often had these oversized papier-mâché heads with fixed, expressionless faces.
2 meters tall. Fixed expression.
And sometimes they were painted a uniform gray color. This was apparently chosen sometimes for racial neutrality in their messaging.
Wait, a 2-meter-tall gray figure with a fixed expression and stiff neck. That sounds remarkably like some of the core descriptions the kids gave.
It's a striking match, isn't it? And think about the movement. These were either rod puppets or people inside large costumes. They would move stiffly. They'd have stiff necks because the head is fixed or oversized. To look around, they'd have to turn their whole body. The bouncy movement could easily come from someone walking inside a large, potentially cumbersome costume, especially on uneven ground.
And the viewing conditions, the kids weren't right up close, were they?
No, they were looking from the schoolyard. Estimates are like 100 to 200 meters away. The figures were near the edge of the school grounds, partially obscured by tall grass and trees.
So you're seeing this tall, gray, stiffly moving figure, partially hidden from a distance.
Exactly. It's a recipe for misidentification. Seeing something that's almost human but moves weirdly looks a bit off, especially when glimpsed through trees. They can trigger what psychologists call the uncanny valley.
Right, the uncanny valley, that feeling you get when something looks very close to human, but just wrong enough to be creepy or unsettling, like some robots or realistic dolls.
It creates this sense of unease and confusion. And some of the kids' drawings are interesting, too. There's one showing a face with long hair peering over, like a brick-patterned box.
Could that be a puppet booth?
It could be. Or it could just be one of those tall costume puppets seen over the bushes or low wall. The point is, the puppet hypothesis offers a way to explain the weird appearance and the bizarre movements, and provides a culturally plausible reason for such figures to even be in that area.
So instead of aliens delivering an environmental warning, it might have been giant puppets delivering maybe a public health message. The kids saw something unusual, they were honest about the stimulus, they just misinterpreted a weird, degraded visual.
That's the idea. It connects a lot of the dots without needing extraterrestrials.
Okay, but this leads to a really crucial point. If we accept the puppet theory, or even just the idea of major contamination and misinterpretation, does that mean we just dismiss everything the kids said? I mean, they were certain. 62 kids felt they saw something extraordinary.
And that's the core tension, you're right. We know the initial interviews were problematic. We have a plausible, prosaic explanation. But the kids' certainty felt real to them and to people like Dr. Mack. This is exactly why we need to pivot away from just this one anecdotal case and look at the actual science of child eyewitness testimony. Can we scientifically measure the reliability of that certainty?
Is there a way to get past the potentially bad interviewing, like in the Ariel case, and assess the underlying memory?
Yes, and this is where the science gets really interesting. Historically, there was this big split. You had the legal world, police procedures globally, often treating child witnesses as inherently unreliable. But then you had developmental psychology research showing that actually kids can monitor their own memory accuracy pretty well from quite young.
So how did science bridge that gap between kids are unreliable and kids can be accurate?
The key was developing better measurement tools. Specifically, something called confidence accuracy, characteristic analysis, CAC analysis.
CAC analysis. Okay, what does that do?
Basically, it plots how confident a witness says they are against how accurate their identification actually is. But crucially, it focuses only on identifications of the actual suspect, not fillers in a lineup. Because in court, identifying the wrong person confidently is useless, but identifying the right person confidently is vital.
Makes sense. So when researchers applied this CAC analysis to studies with child witnesses, what did they find? Is a confident kid usually an accurate kid?
They found that the relationship between confidence and accuracy gets stronger with age, but it's definitely there much earlier than the legal system often assumed. There was a huge experiment, Windsor and colleagues, over 2,200 kids involved.
Wow, that's a big sample.
Huge. And it gave us really solid benchmarks.
Okay, let's hear them. What about older kids?
Okay, late childhood think, ages 10 to 17.
Mm-hmm.
Their explicit confidence was highly reliable. If a kid in that age group made a high confidence identification of the suspect, it was correct 97% of the time.
97%. That's incredibly accurate. Basically as good as adults, maybe even better in some studies.
It's very strong data. It strongly suggests that when an older child or teen expresses high certainty, we should take it very seriously.
Okay, what about younger kids, say middle childhood?
Ages 7 to 9. Here, confidence was still, quote, somewhat informative. Their high-confidence suspect IDs were 91% accurate. Still pretty good, but a noticeable drop from the older group.
Still, 91% is nothing to sneeze at.
Definitely not. But the big drop-off happened in young childhood, ages 4 to 6. In that group, the studies found basically no meaningful link between how confident they said they were and how accurate they actually were.
So a 4-year-old saying, "I'm really sure," doesn't actually tell us much about whether they're right or wrong.
Pretty much, yeah. At least not based on their explicit verbal statement of confidence.
Why is that? Is their memory just that much worse?
Not necessarily. It's more likely about their metacognitive ability, their ability to assess and report on their own internal feeling of certainty. Younger kids find it really hard to translate that subjective feeling onto, say, a 3-point or 5-point confidence scale accurately.
So the certainty might be there internally, but they can't express it reliably using the scale.
That seems to be the issue. But here's the fascinating part. Even when their explicit confidence ratings aren't reliable, their implicit measures, things we can track without asking them how sure they are, that do give us clues about their accuracy.
Implicit measures, like what?
Like their viewing behavior during an identification task. Across all age groups, even down to age 4, kids who made a correct ID were significantly more likely to interact first, maybe click on, point to, or look longer at the actual suspect's face in a lineup compared to any of the filler faces.
So their attention is drawn to the right face first, even if they can't articulate their confidence level well.
Exactly. It's like their visual system recognizes the match automatically before conscious deliberation or rating kicks in. There's also some evidence around response time.
Faster is better.
There's a trend suggesting that, yes, faster decisions in choosing someone from a lineup tend to correlate with better accuracy. It implies the memory trace was strong and easily accessed. Slow, effortful deliberation often happens when the memory is weak or confusing.
Okay, so we have these age-related benchmarks for explicit confidence and these implicit clues like viewing behavior and speed. But what's the underlying reason why older kids get better at matching their confidence to their accuracy?
It seems to come down to learning and calibration over time. The researchers often use a signal detection model to explain it. Think of it like setting a threshold.
A threshold for what?
For deciding, okay, I have enough memory evidence to be highly confident. Young children seem to set that threshold too low. They might feel highly confident even when their internal memory signal is actually quite weak.
They give themselves an A grade too easily, maybe.
That's a great way to put it. Older children and adults, through experienced essentially years of making judgments and getting feedback, figuring out when they were right or wrong, they learn to place that confidence threshold more optimally. They learn to demand more, stronger memory evidence before they allow themselves to report high confidence.
So it's a skill that develops, this metacognitive calibration learned through what you called error feedback training.
Precisely. Young kids just haven't had enough of that life experience, that trial and error feedback, to set their internal confidence criteria appropriately yet. That's why their high confidence statements are less diagnostic of accuracy compared to older kids or adults.
So let's bring this all together. Looking back at the Ariel school case, while it might be explained by misidentification, maybe puppets, and definitely contaminated interviews, the science that has developed partly in response to such cases tells a different story about kids' potential reliability.
Exactly. The old idea that child witnesses are just inherently unreliable seems wrong. The science shows that, particularly from age 7 upwards, children can be very reliable witnesses, especially if we measure their confidence appropriately, looking at high versus low confidence, maybe using those implicit measures too.
Which means?
It means legal systems globally might actually be underestimating how reliable a genuinely confident child witness can be, especially those aged 7 or older. The evidence suggests their high-confidence testimony, when obtained properly, can be very accurate.
So the big takeaway isn't just about debunking one UFO story, but about potentially reevaluating how we treat child testimony in really important situations.
I think so. And it leads to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to consider. We just discussed how this ability to match confidence to accuracy, this metacognition, seems to improve through experience, through this error feedback training over childhood.
Right, learning to set that internal threshold.
So if that's the case, if this critical skill improves with experience, could we potentially teach it? Could targeted instruction or specific training help younger children calibrate their confidence judgments better, making them even more reliably informative witnesses in forensic settings? Something to think about.